from Kansas State University. This is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and here's what's coming up. K-State's Vaishali Sharda will talk about a major research project involving 3 universities, including K-State, which has set out to develop a bioplastics product that can be practically and affordably applied to crop fields for the purposes of soil and water conservation and weed control. Also, K-State's Alison Crane joins Shelby Varner to take a look ahead to a unique event for youth coming up here on the campus in late June. It's called the Flint Hills Farm to Fashion Camp. She'll explain what it's all about. And on this week's horticulture segment, K-State's Jason Graves will discuss ornamental plant selection for attracting bees and other pollinators to the home landscape. All that right here on Agriculture Today. Thanks for listening in once again. You are tuned to Agriculture Today. Very intriguing new research is being undertaken now in the Biological and Agricultural Engineering Department at Kansas State University, and it's going to explore the potential behind the use of what in essence would be a bioplastic mulch in crop fields. Joining us now is an assistant professor of biological and agricultural engineering at K-State, Vaishali Sharda. She's one of those deeply involved in this project. It's just been funded by a $6 million grant by the National Science Foundation. Vaishali, thanks for joining us right here. Give us a notion of the objective, if you would, of the project.
Yes. So this research basically stemmed from some discussions that we had with our collaborators from University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and South Dakota School of Mines. So the idea is bioplastics are already being used in agriculture, but as the cropping season gets over, they leave behind a residue, which is not good for our environment. So the idea was to come up with a biodegradable bioplastic that over the length of the growing season would degrade into the soil without, causing issues with environment. So the bioplastics that are being used these days still have a residue, like I said, plus they also cause a concern for runoff. So water issues also take center stage. So that was the core idea behind developing this proposal to submit to National Science Foundation.
And the purpose of these bioplastics are very much about conservation of all the resources as well as for weed control.
Correct, right? Correct. So as concerns have risen in the past few years over herbicide-resistant weeds, we wanted to focus on this biopolymer being one pot solution, if you will. So basically the idea is to preserve moisture, reduce weed growth, and also supply fertilizer, all in one package that would eventually degrade itself into the soil.
And since you're an agricultural engineer by trade, how can such products be applied? Is that part of what you're studying in this?
Definitely. That's a big part of this research. So as of now, the lab scale product that is being tested in University of Nebraska, Lincoln, is being applied using spray bottles. You know, the spray bottle that you can buy at a dollar store.
Probably not practical in cropping situations.
Right. So the idea is, and that's where Dr. A.J. Sharda from our department is involved. He has a robotic sprayer that he developed for another project that would be used in this project. So he and his team will modify that sprayer to spray this biopolymer film. As of now, we don't know what the product will look like because we are testing 3 different types of biopolymer products that would be developed. One is something that could be developed from corn stalk. The other is a protein-based biopolymer that could either be developed from chicken feathers or hemp. And third is a hybrid. So once the biopolymers are developed at different labs in School of Mines and at UNL, then we will test the sprayer and see what kind of changes need to be done in the nozzles, in the settings of the sprayer to apply it out in the field. So we will start from greenhouse type study before taking it to a field scale.
But the intent here is to, in effect, be able to utilize already existing technology in the way of field sprayers to administer the product without investing in a whole new fleet of equipment.
Correct.
Getting complete coverage, as we discussed with herbicides or any other crop application, will be part and parcel of your objective here too, won't it?
Correct. The project is divided into three broad objectives. So the first objective is development of the biopolymer and testing it in greenhouse level studies. The second objective is strengthening the agro-ecosystem using that biopolymer. How would it impact our water quantity, water quality, given our climate impacts? How would the biopolymer stand in the field? And the third component is the broader impact that it would have on our rural communities, on the rural infrastructure. So the first component, coming back to your question, is where we want to test, first develop the biopolymers and then test it to have that coverage in the field where it is more useful than the products that exist now.
And, of course, one of the considerations here that will eventually enter into this will be, is it an economically viable alternative?
Correct.
Will that be measured within this at some point?
Yes. So the third objective, like I mentioned, is called assessing broader impacts. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Schöngold over at UNL is leading up that objective in collaboration with Dr. Kate Nelson from geography here at K-State and Dr. Pascal Hitzler in computer science at K-State, along with other scientists. So the idea is that a farmer should be able to bring his corn stalk, for example, to a biorefinery to produce this bioplastic. That is a big component, producing the biopolymer locally, and then what impact would that have? Ethanol industry is a great example, right, where it's locally produced and utilized. Similarly, concrete, if you look at civil engineering, usually produced very locally and then used. So that is the core idea. The economics, the impact it would have on our socio-economic structure of our communities, that is also a big part of that third objective of the study.
It is a system, after all.
Right.
That's what you're
Correct.
looking at.
Yes.
And one final particular here, the effect on the standing crop as these biopolymers are applied, that'll have to be accounted for here too.
Correct. So that goes back to our second objective, which is the strengthening agroecosystem objective, and I'm leading that objective. So that would involve looking at impact of the biopolymer on the crop as it grows. So we will have greenhouse studies mainly at UNL. Again, Dr. Darren Rudnick and Chris Proctor are in charge of that component. And then I would be looking at impact of putting that biopolymer, so comparing it with a bare soil, right, and modeling it using a suite of models that we have developed, integrated models. So we have hydrology or water resources playing into it. We have soils. Soils form a very, very big part of this whole idea. And then crop management, do we go with standard crop management practices, which we do not want to change because, you have standard practices. We want to develop our product around those practices. And then models give us power to synthetically create some scenarios which would be hard to create physically, for example.
Weather impacts and such.
Right. So once we have historic data in the region to calibrate our models. So once our models are calibrated, we can create all these synthetic scenarios of having this biopolymer on the field. How would it decay into the soil? What the impacts would be, and how the crop will uptake the fertilizer, for example, and what impact would it have on end of the season yield.
There is a whole lot going on within the scope of this project. The timeline is probably not entirely well defined, but hopefully in a few years, final results can come out to whether these bioplastics will serve the purpose.
Yes, so this is a 4-year funded project, right? So the timelines when we put these together are always more optimistic. So right. We are very, very hopeful, though. So both Dr. Salem and Dr. Sani's lab in South Dakota School of Mines and Dr. Mark Wilkins and Mr. Lauren Isom over at UNL have started producing lab-scale biopolymers, so which is very exciting. So one of Dr. Sani's PhD students discovered a microbe in corn that converts it into a bioplastic. So that is a very exciting first step to harness that and to create a biopolymer from corn stalk. And Dr. Wilkins' team is also working on some initial product at UNL.
This could be a breakthrough in the making. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Very, very exciting and something that can fundamentally change how we farm.
Well, Vaishali, thank you for telling us about the project. It's starting to get rolling in earnest now, and we'll check with you from time to time and see how it's going.
Thank you so much for having me.
She is an assistant professor of biological and agricultural engineering here at K-State, Vaishali Sharda. Once more, K-State is one of several partners involved in this National Science Foundation research project, $6 million grant. It'll take over 4 years' time to carry out all of these objectives in evaluating bioplastics as a potential applied mulch product to crop fields. We'll be back with more. This is Agriculture Today.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. I'm Shelby Varner. The Flint Hills Farm to Fashion Camp is coming up this summer, and today we're joined by K-State Sheep and Miko Extension Specialist Alison Crane. And Alison is actually a part of the committee who gets to help put this on. So Alison, can you explain to us what is the Flint Hills Farm to Fashion Camp?
Yeah, so it was this idea that I was actually approached by our textiles and fashion department here at K-State, a few of the faculty members over there, and they are very passionate about animal or natural fibers and educating all ages of people about how we can better utilize those fibers. So they had seen that in my background, I was also very passionate about the animal side of just the fiber industry, and that I coach the wool judging team as well. And so they approached me about providing an opportunity like this. And so we got the funding a few years ago, and we had to make it through COVID a little bit. But once we got through all of those complications, I guess, we decided to start hosting these camps. And so we provide different modules throughout the 3 to 4 days of this camp, and they learn how to shear sheep. They, pretty loosely how to shear sheep, but they get the experience so that they can appreciate just how difficult that can be, and then how to harvest the fiber, how to process that fiber, and then actually take that to a textile or an end product. And so we go through dyeing and weaving and just kind of all the steps from, farm to a shelf product.
What's the inspiration behind the drive of putting this together for people?
Mostly it's just that we're all very passionate about the fiber industry and also how sustainable it is. So that's kind of the new buzzword, I guess. But the sheep industry especially is one of those industries that has always been sustainable and always focused on sustainability. And when we talk about animal fibers, especially wool, it's the most sustainable fiber out there. You can feed an animal grass, the most natural vegetation to consume, and grasses that a lot of other animals won't eat. And they make that into a fiber product that we can use in a lot of different textiles. And then when we talk about discarding garments, as most of us do on a relatively regular basis, many of the products that we discard, as far as clothing, actually don't biodegrade once they're put into a landfill, but wool does. And so it has all these very unique properties on top of that as well. But when we talk about sustainability, it's the most sustainable fiber out there. So yeah, another reason why we're so passionate about it, and we want to share that knowledge with other people.
Who do you encourage that comes to this event to share that knowledge with them?
This is really targeting youth, so ages 13 to 18 predominantly, but it's students that have an interest, whether it's on the agricultural side of it, so raising fiber animals, because if that's the part of it you're passionate about, you need to know about the end products. And so that's what I always tell people. That's where my passion lies. Once it gets put into a wool sack, I'm kind of done with it, and I never really knew how it gets made into a final product. And that's something that through this process of making this camp, I've learned more about, and it's fascinating. But then when we talk to, so it's Dr. Kim Holler-Connell and Kelsey Doty and Melody LaHue in the Textiles and Fashions department, and when we see them, they're the opposite. They're on the opposite end of that spectrum, where they don't know as much about what happens on the sheep end and how those fibers are actually harvested and grown, and how the way we manage those animals affects those fibers. And so getting to appreciate all sides, I think, will benefit students. So even if we have a lot of youth that are really getting into knitting and weaving and spinning and all these different facets of the fiber industry, but they don't know where the fiber comes from either. So I think if you're interested in one side of it, the camp provides a great opportunity to learn the appreciation for the other end. And anymore, American consumers want to know where their products are coming from. And the more you can appreciate the source, the better.
For people who want to come, they don't need to be involved in it. They just need to have an interest.
Yes, no experience required. We will teach you. I actually sat down and learned how to weave this past summer. So no experience required whatsoever.
A learning experience for everyone.
Yes, and all of the youth were better than me. So
sounds like fun.
It was a blast.
You've talked about previous of textile and fashion industry professors and experts, and then also the sheep experts at K-State. Will I get to hear from both people?
Yes. So we will all be present at the camp, throughout the camp, giving our perspectives kind of throughout the few days of the camp. And then we'll also have that sheep producer and his spouse there as well, talking about their experiences on farm and in the fiber textile industries.
So for people who want to come, a lot of expert information coming while also getting to get their hands on things.
Exactly, yes.
This is the second year of doing it. What influenced it from last year to go ahead and put in the time and effort to do it again?
Yeah, so we maxed out our enrollment in a very short amount of time. And then we had some parents that kind of tagged along with the students last summer, and they actually encouraged us to make an adult version of this camp. So hopefully in the near future, we can entertain doing that. But it was just the interest level of the students. And we, as part of the whole grant process, we want to continue developing these modules to perfect them in a way, and so that we can continue to provide it, whether it's through a camp or through an online camp where more states can access this information.
How has this year's camp differed from what was last year?
Yeah, so we added a day. So as we develop these modules more and more, start including more information in them and learning how much time some of this takes, we kind of lengthen those modules. And then we keep adding more and more into them. So it's going to be a little bit longer. Also, because of COVID restrictions, we didn't go to our farm. And so that shortens the camp as well. And so with this summer's camp, we're actually going to be going to a working fiber farm. So it's a local sheep producer who grows fiber products and actually processes those fiber products into a final textile. So we'll actually be able to go there this year.
If participants came last year, is it worth them coming again, or do you encourage to let new people experience?
So because of limited registration, part of me says, we would love for new people to come and be able to experience the camp, but I also highly encourage people to come again if they so choose. But we're probably going to give priority to new students.
Participants who are coming, do they need to bring anything with them?
No, so we will tell them if they need to bring their lunches. So most of the days they will provide their lunch for themselves. But we will give all of that information once registration occurs. And other than that, it's really just bringing your phone or a camera, and especially if you have your parents with you so that you can get cool pictures, but we'll take pictures as well.
For people, do they need to be a 4-H member to participate in this event?
No, we do not require any membership to any organization to participate in this event. It is just free registration, participate at will.
When is it?
So this event is going to occur June 20th through the 23rd.
And where is this taking place at?
So this is going to all be on campus. We usually split time between the sheep and goat unit here on campus and then Justin Hall.
What is the cost if people want to do this?
Completely free.
And if people want to find out more information, where can they do that?
Yeah, so they can always email myself. It's arcrane, CRANE, at ksu.edu. But for any registration information, we actually have a flyer out that you can see through your local 4-H offices or county offices, or you can email kyhc@ksu.edu.
What makes you excited and inspired to help with this event?
So I have been accused of being way too passionate about wool, and that's really the underlying factor. So I don't know many people that are more passionate about wool products than I am, and it's what really got me to latch on to the sheep industry years and years and years ago, because I just find that an animal that can produce that many products and that many useful products that are that sustainable, that resourceful, and adaptable to so many different environments, it's just absolutely fascinating to me. I always am wearing at least one piece of wool clothing, and it's usually something that's American produced and American made. And it's just, I'm a very proud supporter of the industry and the producers that are in it and how passionate they are about what they're making. And so that's really what drives me to share that information with youth. And if we can get them involved in something like this at that young of an age, they're going to be unstoppable.
Thank you, Allison, for coming in and talking about this camp.
Thank you for having me.
That was Alison Crane, a K-State Sheep and Meat Goat Extension Specialist who is helping put on the Flint Hills Farm to Fashion Camp. That is taking place June 20th through the 23rd here at Kansas State University's campus. If you're interested in finding out more information about the camp, you can email Allison at arcrane@ksu.edu or find out more information from your local 4-H Extension offices or email kyhc@ksu.edu. I'm Shelby Varner, and you're listening to Agriculture Today, and we will be back with more on the K-State Radio Network.
Now for you on Agriculture Today, our weekly horticulture segment, and reflecting here back on comments that were made yesterday during K-State's latest Garden Hour webinar, and we hope you were able to take that in. But if not, we're going to touch upon several of the principles which were discussed there on establishing pollinator plants in one's landscape for continuous food sources for pollinators. And the one who covered this on the Garden Hour webinar is with us now. Jason Graves is the Central Kansas Extension District horticulture agent. Jason, this is something that has gained a little more interest amongst homeowners in recent years, bringing pollinators in. Talk about that, if you would.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's one of my favorite things to discuss with some of our constituents is just thinking through pollinators, or just the interest there in beneficial insects in general also, and just how we support those, and then maybe some gardening practices that we can utilize as we, even in our little backyards, can have a pretty dramatic impact on biodiversity, you know, when we choose to participate in the ecosystem and support the insects and the food chain that's there around us.
It's all tied together. And the idea here, as you promoted during the webinar, was providing that continuous, stressing that word, continuous food resource for pollinators. That means selecting plants strategically here.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Eric, kind of the big idea we've been discussing was just the thought that, we want to, when we get into thinking through pollinators, we realize that some of our bees, such as a bumblebee, for example, has quite a unique life cycle, and, there's some periods during the year where they're solitary and periods where they're social, but regardless, they need some sort of food source throughout the entire year in order to, survive and thrive. And so we want to take that into account as we plan and plant in our landscapes. And so being aware that, for example, a bumblebee queen overwinters, that's the only portion of the bumblebee colony that overwinters is the queen. And so early in the spring, right away, that queen needs resources, food and nectar and pollen to begin that new colony. And so we're thinking through, how can we as gardeners provide those resources from early spring all the way to late fall throughout the life cycle that these pollinators have, so that they can thrive and continue to provide the services of pollination and various things they contribute.
So is there an array of plant material that will serve that need?
Yeah, exactly, and that's the neat thing, I think, as people get into learning more about some of our native plants. Some of our, of course, here in the prairie, we have some real awesome plants that are tough, but also provide the food sources for these pollinators. And, thinking through some of our early spring plants, our summer flowers and our fall flowers, we have quite a palette, we can choose from once we get kind of interested in planting. And so we look at anything from, the spring bulbs that are popping up right now. Many of those can be beneficial for pollinators. We also have some early spring flowers that we commonly look for, like spiderwort or columbine, some of these wonderful natives that provide those spring resources. But, we go into summer and fall, and we also consider other plants that, are going to be blooming, especially late in the year when a lot of the pollinators are getting ready to overwinter, or needing those final resources. And so, we look at things like the sunflowers or the goldenrod, the asters, the different things that are out there to support those. And believe me, we could create quite a list to draw from, and there's a lot of variety to consider with these plants, and we can find something for any landscape.
Folks can take in the replay of the Garden Hour webinar, which is stored online for viewing. This latest edition on pollinator plants for continuous food sources incorporated into the home landscape. It's a great project for folks to follow up on. Jason, thank you for these brief moments right here.
Oh, glad to be here, Eric. Thanks for the time.
He is Jason Graves, the Central Kansas Extension District horticulture agent who presented that webinar yesterday. That's this week's horticulture segment and our time for today. Thanks for tuning in. Eric Atkinson, this has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.